my next guest, who understands that I just want to come and buy a crib for my mama, let her know her oldest son is sorry for the drama, and I'm going to work with Jay Bilas right here on The Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Jay?
Rich, how you doing, brother?
Did I say that right?
You did. You are very good at this, and I think back oftentimes fondly on our time at ESPN together, back when we both had hair, and back one night when you were doing a story at the end of SportsCenter about a criminal defendant getting a hoopty, which was an old car.
Yes.
And you then introduced our show as College Hoopty Tonight, which was one of the great intros of all time.
Oh man. I remember those days so fondly, Jay. I really, really do. And I do remember you writing your notes in your notebook in the newsroom and me leaning over one day and seeing your hand move over. And had I not seen your hand actually write this stuff out, I would have thought it was printed, that there was something I called the Bilas font. Your penmanship was something that's an A+. Does the Bilas font still exist, Jay?
It still exists. It's a family curse that most of the men in my family have decent handwriting. So we could never be doctors.
The Bilas font, I love it. Jay Bilas here on the Rich Eisen Show. Okay, set the stage for me here, because it seems to me there's really nobody that stands out head and shoulders above the rest 10 days from Selection Sunday. Would that be a fair assumption here, Jay?
That's more than a fair assumption. That's exactly right. But when the season started, I had said something on the air that I'd said I would not take a team in this year's college basketball field against any of the top 6 last year. And I got criticized for saying that, but I didn't think any of the teams this year stood out as being truly great teams. So it reminded me a lot of maybe a year like 2010, where, not anybody can win this year. That's not true. But the top teams are vulnerable in a way that we haven't seen for quite a while. And it's proven out. It's actually worse than I thought. We've got a lot of very good teams, but we don't have teams that have been separated like we had last year, where that, hey, one of these teams may fall down in the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, but all these teams are Elite 8. All these top 6 teams are Elite 8 teams. We don't have that this year. And we've got – but the difference is, it's not like the middle has risen up to be able to challenge the top dogs. We've got the same usual suspects that are in the top 25. The same teams are at the top of each league. It's just they're more vulnerable to being beaten, and that means that we could have an odd first weekend, but it's probably going to normalize by the second weekend like it does every year.
Well, you kind of answered my next question that I was planning to ask you. It just seems that we're getting to the point, whether it's because kids aren't staying very long in college, or at least the cream of the crop is not, or there are more programs around the country where top talent can go to that doesn't play every night on ESPN or on Fox Sports or anything like that, where we get a Cinderella that doesn't just bring the glass slipper to the Sweet 16 or even the Elite 8, but truly the whole darn way, the whole shoot, man. We kind of saw it with Butler a few years ago, but are we getting to that where that might be the normalcy for this tournament, Jay?
No, I don't think so, Rich. I think what we've got this year is we've got a bunch of different events that came together. One, the freshman class isn't very good relative to the freshman classes we've had the last few years and the ones that we're going to have next year and the year after. Because the talent coming in next year and the year after is much better than this year. So you haven't seen teams like Duke or Kentucky or the like replenish their rosters with big-time freshmen that are ready to play right away and one and done, ready to go into the NBA. And then you had a bunch of teams that were at the top last year that lost a ton of talent. So Kentucky lost 7 guys that went to the NBA and then replaced it with a lesser freshman class. Duke lost 3 guys that were taken in the top 17 in the draft. Wisconsin lost 2 first-rounders and 4 seniors out of their lineup. Arizona lost 3 guys to the NBA and 4 guys out of their starting lineup. And so you've seen a bunch of that stuff, but you haven't seen teams that have risen up and you haven't seen like a Wichita State of a couple years ago where they're undefeated or something like that. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing the non-usual suspects, the non-traditional teams rising up in the analytics or having some great record in the conference. It's been this year of really good games, really good competition, but we haven't had separation and we haven't had anybody dominate anything, even dominate any league. No league has really been dominated. Everybody's got 4 losses or 5 losses, it's really kind of hard to figure out as to you never know who's going to win a particular game, but what's going to happen with regard to the tournament? Is it going to be this kind of bloodbath? Is it going to be difficult? See, I think it's going to be easier to seed than other tournaments we've had because when everybody is within shouting distance of one another and they're not separated by that much, all you have to do is count their quality wins, their quality road wins, and the like teams that have more of those wins, they get in first and they get seeded higher. It's really not that difficult. So I hope the committee doesn't screw that up and try to overthink this thing because I don't think it's going to be that hard.
Jay Bilas joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So when you're trying to figure out how to fill out your bracket or make sense of the madness, do you go with teams, with coaches who have been there and done that over a team that doesn't? I mean, what is going to be the difference maker for all of this, Jay?
I think it's probably going to be matchup related, Rich, that you're going to have. If you have a team that can really shoot it versus a team that struggles, sort of defending on the perimeter, a bigger team, you may be able to pick an upset here or there. But oftentimes, I think you're going to be looking at, all right, is the team healthy? Have they been playing well? But you're always going to be subject to kind of what happened in 2011, where you have a good team that does something in the tournament that they didn't do consistently in the regular season. And one of those teams was VCU. Like VCU got into the tournament in 2011, and they really hadn't beaten any tournament teams on their way to the tournament. Good team that had some really good players. But I think during the course of that year, VCU had hit 10 threes in a game once. Well, they did it in the tournament 3 times. So they did something in the span of a couple weeks that they didn't, 3 times that they only did once in the span of 4 months during the regular season. So you can have that happen. And this year, you've got, rather than have teams rise up and do something, I think what we may see are some teams that are highly seeded that fall down. And if they fall down earlier than they normally would, then you're going to see paths to the Final Four open up. So we may see some of that. It's just that it's not that I see all these incredibly strong mid-major teams or non-Power 5 teams. The teams that you're seeing are a team like Xavier out of the Big East. Xavier's legit. They can get to the Final Four without anybody falling down. Mm-hmm. Or what if State Bonaventure? State Bonaventure's probably going to get in the tournament out of the A-10. They've got 2 really good guards. One of whom, Marcus Posley, just had 47 points last night. They've got another one named Jalen Adams averaging 18, 19 points a game. So maybe they pull an upset, but are they good enough to get to Houston? That's a different question, I think, is a harder one to answer. I think the answer without somebody falling down is probably no.
How does Izzo do it every year? It's incredible, Jay.
Well, it is incredible. And he's got really good players, and he's also got a culture there and standards that are really high. And those guys, they have an identity. Every year their team's got an identity. This team's got, if this is like 2010, like I think it is, Izzo's team went to the Final Four that year with Draymond Green. And they wound up, if I remember right, I think they lost to Butler. I can't remember, though. But Butler was in the Final Four that year, went to the championship game, and wound up losing to Duke. And so this is a year very much like that, I think. So having Denzel Valentine, who's a Player of the Year candidate, this do-everything player, and then they've got a great group of shooters. Bryn Forbes is as good a shooter as there is in the country. I think he just had 33 last night. I think that was the right number. But he hit 11 threes.
Yep.
So he sets a record against Rutgers, and they're what I think you need to be. They are healthy, which is not always the case with Michigan State at the end of the year. They have fresh minds and fresh legs, and they're heading into the tournament in a confident fashion. And so I agree with you. I think they're a team that you're going to see a lot of people picking to get to Houston.
And Oklahoma and Kansas, just seeing them, I'd love to see them play one more time. Maybe for the whole damn shooting match, too. You do?
Yeah, I think they will, although Oklahoma's not playing great right now. They're not shooting the ball as well as they have.
Right.
For a period of time, they were the best shooting team in the country. Now that's Michigan State, actually. Michigan State has supplanted Oklahoma as the number 1 three-point shooting team in the country. St. Mary's not behind out of California. But if they're not shooting well, that's going to be a problem because they're good defensively, not great, but they've got to be able to stretch a defense by knocking shots down. If they can't do that, that makes it a lot more difficult for them to win at the highest level.
Well, so can you venture a guess? Are you cool in venturing a guess 10 days removed from Selection Sunday and what is clearly the biggest toss the chessboard up in the air year that we could see in college basketball that you think can win this whole thing, Jay?
Yeah, I think the four best teams heading into the Selection Sunday right now are Kansas, Virginia, Michigan State, and North Carolina. And then after that, I would put Xavier up there. I do think Villanova is very, very good, although Xavier and Villanova, if you look at who they've beaten, have not beaten the same caliber of teams that the other top-seeded teams have beaten. And I do think they're going to get some deference from the committee, but I'm not sure that in this type of year you shouldn't be saying, well, wait a minute, who played and beat the best teams? Let's not be taking too much of the eye test on this one, and do it by accomplishment, because they've all had the chance to play the same teams. And then another team that I think has got a real chance is Oregon. Although they're young in the backcourt. Oregon's very good out of the West Coast, and they're the Pac-10 champion, and I think they've got a real chance when they get to the tournament.
So, last question for you. Let's just say I wave a wand, your cell phone rings. It's an Indianapolis area code. And the NCAA calls up and say, Jay, we've been listening to you. We've been reading your Twitter feed. We read everything that you say about us. We'd like you to run us. Mark Emmert's out, you're in. President Jay Bilas. What would you do? What's the first thing you would do, Jay?
I would probably have sports-specific governance, and I would immediately scrap the rule book and get a new one. And I'd operate the NCAA like an athletic association that runs athletic events instead of trying to run universities. And I'd let the universities handle their admissions and the way they do business on the academic side, and I would make the NCAA what it was intended to be, and that's an athletic association that handles sports. Rich, at the end of the day, this is just sports. We are not bringing drugs to market where there's a health concern, public safety. We are not transporting heavy explosives. We don't need a compliance complex like we've got. It's just not that big of a deal. So I would have each sport governed on its own to where it could be a little more nimble and handle its own concerns, because we don't need the same rules for golf that we have for football. It's not that hard. And I would take something that we've made extraordinarily complicated, and I would simplify it.
Well, what do you think, just knowing the situation as you do, what do you think the first pushback to President Bilas would be on something like that?
The amount I would demand to be paid.
You start at the Goodell salary? Is that what you start with, Jay? Is that what it was?
I am telling you, if Emmert is making $1.8 million, I would be making more.
That would be the first pushback to the President Bilas administration. I love it. I love it. Jay, I remember meeting you for the first time, and I love seeing what you have become. And the voice that you bring, the reasoned voice that you bring, the intelligent voice that you bring. I love watching and listening to you. So congratulations on everything that's gone on with your career, Jay. You keep it up, please.
Well, Rich, I feel exactly the same way about you. You're a magnificent broadcaster and professional, and except how you perform at the Combine, I'm extraordinarily proud of you.
No, look, I put heart on display, Jay. You can't put a price tag on that,
Yeah, well, heart isn't enough. You need athletic talent.
Oh, Jay, I love you. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
All right, brother. Thank you.
You bet. That's Jay Bilas.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.